A Gathering of Gargoyles by Meredith Ann Pierce. Chapter 6, City of Thieves. Solstar slid gradually across the sky. Ariel felt no weariness, no hunger. Still, nor did the little dust shrimp hidden away among her garment's folds seem to require any food. She met no one. From time to time she spoke to the figurehead upon her staff, but the heron never awoke. The land began to fall at last. The cliffs no longer rose so high above the shore. Solstar hung due east directly beside her. She saw the city of Talus in the distance before. It stood upon a rocky arm of land jutting out into the sea. A steady trickle of travelers approached from the north and west. Ariel lifted the hood of her traveling cloak. The wind off the sea had begun to rise. No one paid her the slightest attention as she joined the others, passing between the high double gates. Not the women in long tunics that fell to their shoes, nor the men in trousers and sarks. Their skin was pale, dusky blue. Ariel had never before seen Brinaean skin. The city was smaller than Istrinus, had none of the graceful arches and spires of the east. The buildings of Talus were all squat and square, half-timbered of silvery wood and gray pearly seastone. Ariel found herself passing through market streets and jeweler streets. Perfumers brewed strange-scented stuff. Knife-makers offered hilts set with carbuncles and pearls. Once, in broad sunlight, Ariel saw a jeweler draw from his sleeve a tiny glass vessel half filled with blue fluid. "Pure corundum," he whispered, offering it to a man with whom he bargained. "The blood of the sea. One sup," he said, "would keep one young for a dozen years, and he was willing to part with it for only 1,000 times its silver weight." He twirled the vial then, its contents gleaming, swirling like water, but leaning closer. Ariel saw that it was dust, and very like the stuff she had scooped from the sea, though not so dark a blue. Neither the merchant nor his buyer even glanced at her, though moments earlier the seller had chased 2 ragged boys away. Ariel moved on. She crossed the square and found herself before a tavern. A high wall enclosed its yard, and 2 tall doorkeepers stood on the threshold of the supper hall, turning would-be guests and curious onlookers away. Ariel approached, expecting to be told the same, but neither so much as looked at her, and she passed between them without trouble. Shrugging, puzzled, she supposed a mere player who would sing for her supper and sleep on the hearth must be beneath their notice. The hall was large, people and tables crowding the room. The last of the dusk light streamed through the windows. A great hearth took up half the far wall. Ariel had never before seen so much wood burned at once. In Terrain, where wood was scarce, they burned oil in lamps, but here great boughs and branches blazed. Not the white or yellow flame of oil, but red. Only 2 others sat upon the hearth. One a solidly built young man, with fair hair and pale green skin. His companion was a girl younger than Ariel, lank and straight-limbed still. A circlet of twisted cloth kept her cinnamon hair from her eyes. Her skin was Brinaean blue. Ariel knelt upon the hearth, stood her staff in one corner, and threw back her hood. The blue-skinned girl, who had been gazing absently in her direction, started suddenly, stared at Ariel. Ariel glanced at her. "Is anything amiss?" she asked. She unfastened her cloak and laid it down, began unwrapping her bandolin. The girl stared a moment more, then shook her head and seemed to recover herself. "How long have you been there? I didn't see you." Ariel smiled. "Only a moment. I am Ariel." She sat, starting to tune her bandolin. The girl's expression abruptly brightened. "Astoria? I think you must be the only Storia in Talus tonight. No wonder the doorkeepers let you in. How much did they ask?" Ariel looked up. "Nothing. They paid me no attention at all." "They let you in for nothing?" the girl exclaimed, on her feet then, fists on hips, glaring sourly at the door. "We had to buy our way in." She glanced at her companion, but the young man, though he watched both her and Ariel closely, said nothing. In time, Ariel began to wonder if he had a tongue. The blue-skinned girl shrugged, sat down again. "Well, no matter. We should make it back in 3s tonight." She leaned against her companion, stretched. A server passed beside the hearth. Almost quicker than Ariel's eye could follow, the girl had snatched 6 olives from his tray. The boy moved on without a glance. Then The girl was tossing the fruits in a circle before her. The pattern became a figure 8. Just as suddenly she had turned to her companion, and the two were tossing the dark fruit between them in intricate loops. Abruptly, Ariel realized the girl had passed every one of her young men, who juggled one group. Abruptly, Ariel realized the girl had passed every one to her young man, who juggled one group single-handed in a circle, while making a figure 8 between his already occupied hand and the free. Ariel stared. She had never seen such a thing. The girl sprang up, did 2 handsprings upon the hearth, before flipping back on her feet, with a gesture first to herself, then to her companion. Nat and Galnor, travelling players, feet to dazzle and delight. Her companion caught all 6 olives then, seemingly at once. He tossed 3 to Nat, who offered Ariel one. Ariel accepted gratefully, bit into the dark, salty flesh. Her hunger and thirst were beginning to return. She laid her bandolion upon the floor and glanced about to see when supper might be served. Outside, the light of setting Sol Star was growing very dim. Ariel felt the evening chill, even so near the fire. Servers began to close and bar the shutters. Torches were lit, the outer door drawn shut. Guests at the table began demanding the meal. It was brought almost at once, huge platters of brittle meal cakes and animal's flesh, baskets of violet plums. Nothing was given to the players on the hearth, and now, with only the taste of a single olive on her tongue, Ariel found her mouth watering, her limbs feeling weak with hunger. Well, muttered Nat after a little, I see they mean to leave us to ourselves. She glanced at Ariel with half a smile. Agile fingers are good at more than juggling. She rose and glided between the tables, juggling empty mugs and plates, at first for a bit of food or a sip of ale. After a while, their own hunger eased, some of the guests began tossing her more substantial tidbits, which she pocketed, returning to the hearth at last, well laden. Ariel ate gladly, new apples and fried cakes and wings of forest lizards. She fed the little dust shrimp crumbs as well, and once Galnor snatched full mugs from a passing tray, so deftly the server never missed them. As Ariel lifted the sweet foaming honey beer to her lips, a strange savage cry arose from outside the inn. Choking, she set down the mug. The talk of the supper hall became suddenly much quieter. Some had turned their eyes to the door opening on the tavern's courtyard. It stood ajar. The cry continued. Ariel felt her skin grow taut. A shiver take her as she listened. Then the eerie keening died away, and guests turned back to their meals and their companions at table. The hubbub gradually resumed. Ariel glanced at the girl beside her. What was that? Nat glanced up, licking her fingers of grease. She shrugged. Only the beast. It has been howling like that every now and again since they brought it in. What beast is that? Said Ariel. The girl looked up in earnest now. Do you not know? The beast that has been putting the whole countryside in terror these last day months. Ariel shook her head. What has it done? They say, said Nat, it has never done anything to any honest traveller, save stare at them and wail, though it has put thieves to flight, and more than one has felt its teeth. The girl leaned closer. Merchant folk have begun to stay away for fear of meeting it, and travellers have been afraid to move along the roads, even by day, save in large, well-armed caravans, which has spoilt the thieves' trade famously. So at dawn this day month that the Irish bandits set out in search of it, and they have captured it, for they brought it back to the city in a wooden cage only hours ago. She nodded. It is they who sit there. Ariel followed the line of her gaze, and spotted a band of roughly dressed women and men at one central table. She had taken little note of them before. Most of them wore gold in the lobes of their ears, and their captain a silver band high upon his one bare arm. All had dirks. They were eating off the finest plate in the house. Nat was saying, They have their caged beast in the courtyard, and all the other guests are here in hopes of glimpsing it. Again the eerie wailing arose. Again the talk grew quieter. What will they do with it? Asked Ariel. The timbre of that unearthly cry set her teeth on edge. Nat shrugged. Sell it, I suppose, for Aruda's ransom. Saba, the bandit queen, keeps a stable of strange beasts in the north. Horses, I think they call them. Perhaps she will buy. She began to say more, but the guests, well satisfied of food and drink, had begun demanding entertainments. Nat and Galnor rose from the hearth, tumbling and juggling circles and arcs. Then intricate patterns Ariel could not name. The watchers threw fruits and cakes to them at first, then spoons and cutlery, finally coins which seemed to vanish unexpectedly whenever Nat juggled. The guests only laughed and tossed her more. But at length it was Ariel's turn. Galnor and Nat retired to the hearth. Ariel lifted her bandolin. She had meant to tell them some tale she had learned in Isternus. Of Silva, perhaps, and her chieftain, Imrail. But the guests, above the keening from without, roared for a tale of fantastical beasts. She told them the tale of the Dark Angel. Sometimes singing and sometimes speaking, Ariel spoke of a Turanian girl who followed her mistress to the Dark Angel's keep, of the vampire's withered brides, the wraiths, and of the weird gargoyles that were his watchdogs. The quiet of the hall deepened, the clink of cups. The murmur died. The eerie yips from the courtyard ceased. Ariel had not reached the tale's end, had come only as far as the girl's return from the desert with the horsehoof cup, her freeing of the gargoyles from their silver chains. A great commotion from the courtyard suddenly. Shouts, then the sound of splintering wood, cries, and running footfalls. Ariel broke off in mid-sentence. 2 bandits burst through the courtyard door. "Master!" one of them cried. "The beast is loose!" "It seemed quiet. We forgot to watch. We were intent upon the tale. It must have gnawed through the bars." The woman broke off with a shriek. Behind the pair, the door gaped wide. No one had thought to shut or bar it. Guests nearby it, scattered as a great haggard beast slunk into the room. It snarled dog-like and snapped. It was all over, even one shade of gray. It was all over one even shade of gray. Even its eyes and teeth and tongue were gray. Its shabby matted fur stood on end. A collar of yellow metal encircled its throat. Ariel gazed upon it from the hearth. She felt her heart contract. Beside her, Nat shrank against Galnor. Just then the beast caught sight of Ariel, its gray eyes wild and wide. It padded toward her. Those in its path shrank away from it. Some held daggers, but none dared strike. Ariel half rose, put her bandolin from her. She could see the creature's skeletal ribs, ridges of spine along its back. Her knees gave way. "Grayling," she whispered. "Grayling, first gargoyle ever I tamed. What has become of you? You are all bone beneath the skin." For a moment the gargoyle stared at her, lips pulled back from its broken teeth, tongue loose and lolling. It panted hoarsely. Its tattered ears lay flat against the skull. Ariel held her arms to it. "I did not set you free that you should come to this." The beast bellied down before her on the floor. It crept forward, a strange whine gibbering from its throat. Its curved claws scattered the rushes, scathed the floorboards underfoot. The creature reached her knees. Ariel bent to stroke it as the gray beast laid its huge and grisly head upon her lap. There was not a sound in the room but the soft, harsh breathing of the lookers-on and the fizzing crackle of the fire. "A sorceress!" someone whispered then. "The Storia is a witch. See how she has charmed the beast." Ariel did not look up, was aware of the inn-guests shifting uneasily, of Nat staring from Galnor's arms. The bandits of Ariel gazed upon her in outright rage. Ariel stroked the gargoyle's heavy, strange head, fingered its matted, thin fur. "What has become of you?" she murmured again. "You do not look as though you have tasted food since you left me. Eat this." She reached into her pack. "More sorceries!" a woman cried. "What's that in her hand?" "A jewel, a dagger." "It's just a plum," murmured Nat, coming away from Galnor a little. Ariel dusted the fine fuzz from the apricot, held it out. The gargoyle ate eagerly, almost desperately, strained to swallow against the collar about its throat, its gray tongue slavered, catching the runnels of blood-colored juice. When she held only the clean stone in her hand, the gargoyle set its lips to it, gnawing at it, but Ariel drew it gently away. "Not the seed," she told it. "I have promised to save the seeds." She put the stone away in Haddon's robe, stroked the head of the gray beast again and again, for it yipped and trembled still, and we will pause there.